today's installment of the Trader Brandon Transmissions.
Episode 3 of the Trader Brandon Transmissions. We're moving up in the world. We've got some wireless mics. We've got a nice little phone lighting rig now. We're taking this serious, which is probably the only thing we'll take serious in tonight's episode, to be totally honest with you, because our guest is a bit of a wild man, bit of a insurance policy gone wrong. Mr. Kirk Thatcher is our guest tonight, and I'm watching comments. I got it loading over here on the laptop as well. But Kirk is quite the guy. A lot of stories we're going to cover tonight. If you're not familiar with him, Kirk has worked on everything from Return of the Jedi, Gremlins, Poltergeist, Dinosaurs. He's worked with the Muppets for many years. So it should be a fun show. A Tiki aficionado, enthusiast, a just all-around wild and crazy guy. So hopefully, until he tunes in here, hopefully you guys are enjoying the show. It's fun to do. It's fun to put together. It kind of became a little bit of a thing, and which is good, which is nice. I think now's the time. We can use a little bit of escapism, and everybody's really wanted to come on, so we've got a lot lined up. Tomorrow night is Dave Perillo. If you're familiar with Dave, he's an artist. A lot of you probably met him over at Epcot. He comes out for the Art Festival of the Arts every year or so. And then Friday night we have Oscar-winning composer Mr. Michael Giacchino will be joining us on the program. So we're just waiting for Kirk to come in. But yeah, it's been great. We've got a lot of other shows lined up. We've got a lot of people that are figuring out schedules, and then we can get them on the show as well. But we're going to try to do our best to keep you distracted during all of this chaos and wildness. Hopefully everyone is doing okay. Hopefully everyone is hanging in there and enjoying some quarantine. There's nothing wrong with a nice quarantine every once in a while. All right, I'm going to text him and see where he is here. Let's move him along a little bit. Let's see. I didn't see his name pop up, but let's take a look and see if he's live yet, or if he's watching, so I can request him in. Michael will be fun on Friday. Someone said, great idea, can't wait for Giacchino. Yeah, he's a great guy, he's a good friend, and I'm really excited to have him on the show. It should be a lot of fun. He's got quite the collection of fun things that I'm sure we'll talk about, not to mention his resume of work and all the things that he does. He's a busy man. Just looking at comments. I wrote down some of the questions that you guys have asked. I thought I would do that this time, and I put the question box up before the show and had some questions come through, so that was good. So we've got some of those questions. And then, as always, Brian Kessinger actually pointed this out, but at some point during the show, feel free to take a screenshot and then tag myself, tag Kirk, and repost it so that people know we're doing this. Nice jacket. Thanks, Noel. Yeah, this thing's crazy. I don't remember where I found this, but it's absolutely wild. And it's all just African tribal figures. And you don't get a lot of chances to wear this, so I thought I'd break it out tonight. Jay wants to know what the pendant I have on is. Can you see that? Ooh. There, I forget who made this. There's an artist on the back, but it's some squiggles. But the reason I got this one is this is a Oceanic Arts shield that is hanging like that on the wall in Trader Sam's in Anaheim. So I was attached drawn to this particular pendant. I have a whole wall of pendants over here. I have different necklaces, so I'll probably shake things up and wear a few different ones each time. But all right, where is he? I can only kill so much time. Instagram limits us to an hour, unfortunately, and they will cut us off, as we learned yesterday watching or with the Tiki Tony episode. He says he's ready. Let's find him. he's not popping up. Here we go. Let's make sure he's watching the feed. Live videos of all your collections. We'll do that one night. Yeah, we'll. The very first night we started the live feed, I kind of did a tour of the office here of the study. It looks like you're in Indiana's office, or is he in mine? Could go either way. Let's see. He's not watching the live feed. Ah, there he is. All right, let's hit this. Let's get him in here. There he is. Go live. Boom. Ready? Here we go.
Hey, buddy.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm just going to get framed a little better here. There we go.
All right.
I brought my friend.
You have friends, contrary to popular belief. Ah.
Brought Maxie.
Hi, Max.
Well, I didn't really bring him. We're actually in his room. This is my Tiki room, and he's the master of it. So he's allowing us to be in here, mainly because I'm totally bribing him with lots of cashews and peanuts.
Sure. Someone already just went through and pointed out the haberdashery in this episode is on point tonight.
Yes. Well, we're just starting.
This is true. And I to segue into hats, I feel I should tell you this because I don't know if I ever told you this. So the first time I was ever introduced to you was through you being on Jim Henson's Creature Shop Challenge. And as a viewer of that, I went, I want to be friends with this guy because he has great hats.
I do. I think we'll see 5 or 6 of them tonight. We're Tiki themed, except you did have a special request. So
this is true. My phone keeps wanting to go to sleep, and I don't know why tonight. So if I have to do this every so often, it might get annoying.
Oh, okay. And I'm drinking, in case anyone's curious, because it is a Tiki show, a Dark and Stormy with Myers rum and this stuff, which if you're trying to watch your sugar, this is not a paid advertisement. But Zevia makes a ginger beer, which is great for Dark and Stormies because there's enough sugar in rum, so you don't have to add sugar with the ginger beer. So
there you go. So let's dive in. We've only got an hour, which is just a couple of minutes for someone like you. But how did you get started? What was your first big job or first little job?
Well, I mean, to get paid for, I made some props for my next door neighbors, my best friends. Their dad had a small post-production facility, and he would do these kind of low-budget movies, mainly do the music and the post-production, the editing, sound effects. And so I think I was like 17, and I'd been doing my own movies, making my own special effects, model kits, creature makeups. But I made some props for him. I remember it was a whip that you could actually whip someone with, it wouldn't really hurt them, and I think it was an Indian bow and arrow and a spear or something. Just they were doing some insert shots. What I think he or the company he worked with would do was buy foreign films and then add American actors in it, sort of like what happened with Godzilla, where they put Raymond Burr in, as a newspaper reporter. So that was my first paid gig, and then my first real job was Revenge of the Jedi when I was 18. And that's a whole story, but the quick version is I met Joe Johnston when I was 14, who was the production designer of Star Wars, or at ILM. He designed a lot of the spaceships and storyboarded a lot of the effect scenes. So I don't know. Max he's heard this story so many times. He wants to go back in his cage because he's bored, but I think if he does that, he'll scream. I met Joe, and I showed him my artwork and the things I was doing, and he was very kind. She gave me a tour of ILM, which was down the street from my house. Literally, it was like 1.5 miles away where I grew up in Van Nuys. And then, so after 2-3 years of high school, I knew they were starting on Jedi. It wasn't called Jedi then. It was just the next Star Wars movie. So I'm letting Max go back to his cage. He doesn't. He's bored sitting on a perch next to me listening to me. So I sent him a portfolio of stuff I'd done, and after I went to UCLA for a quarter, and then called him up and said, hey, I know that you guys are gearing up for the next Star Wars movie. I'll make coffee, I'll sweep the floors, anything to work on it. And what was weird or interesting was that he had just put my name on a list for people to hire for the creature shop, because that's kind of had been my focus, is making puppets and creatures, not so much the kids. So I interviewed and I got the job because A, was cheap, and B, I knew all the grunt work. I knew how to mix paint, pour latex rubber, make molds, do castings, molding and casting. I wasn't necessarily great at any of it. I was good enough that I could be trained to be better, but I knew they weren't going to hire me to direct or write. So it was like any way to get the foot in the door. At least I wasn't making coffee or sweeping floors. So that's how I started, and worked at ILM for about 2.5, 3 years. Then went over to my friend Chris Wayless's shop to do Gremlins. And while I was at ILM, not only Jedi, I worked a little bit on Star Treks 2 and 3, on Poltergeist, and then went over to Chris's shop to work on Gremlins, and then did Gremlins for about 9 months. And then started doing rock. Well, then I was down in LA doing puppeteering on the big scenes on Gremlins 1. And then David Fincher and I started a rock video production company in San Francisco, and we did Rick Springfield videos. We did 4 Rick Springfield videos up there. Bop to You Drop, which has an alien and is very spacey. And I designed and played the alien, Tony McVeigh, who sculpted a lot of creatures on Jedi and actually sculpted the Gremlin, the original Gremlins. Sculpted in, and we did it for a song, shot it in an abandoned, or not abandoned necessarily, but a derelict smelting factory from World War II. Because Fincher and I had been friends from day one at ILM. We're the 2 youngest guys there. And then, so that's how I started. And that was like the first 4 years of my career. Boring stuff.
Yeah, no big deal. Yeah, all right. Well, I'm glad we got all that out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
boring stuff. More importantly, when was the last time you put on pants?
Well,
I have a feeling your answer has nothing to do with the quarantine.
No. I mean, it's just I work at home most of the time. If I'm not directing, and even then, it's only because Disney HR rules that I wear pants at work. I basically wear shorts 90% of the time.
There you go. Back to Jedi, though. Tell us about the Rancor monster, because you have a unique story about the Rancor.
Nice segue. Do you ever wear pants? Tell us about Jedi Rancor.
All right, so now about that, let's go back over here.
Well, Phil Tippett had designed the creature, the Rancor, and it was going to be, we all thought, stop motion, because that was his forte. And George, in the middle of production, because we were in Marin County, and he said, I want to do it as a guy in a suit, like the way the Japanese do their monsters. And we were like, what? He's like, come on. He even said, come on, you can show those Japanese guys up. And, Phil, I was in the screening room when this happened, and Phil's like, and even Dennis Murin was kind of in the middle, I guess. He's like, well, it's hard to make it look good. And George's like, come on, you guys can do it. He thought it was a challenge. So we all kind of went back to the shop and was like, God, that's such a weird idea. But mainly because the design was not a guy in the suit design. There's giant arms and a stumpy head and short legs. So Tony McVeigh and Phil, I guess Tony sculpted a lot of it and built up the suit. We built a suit in just a couple of weeks to kind of test it. I mean, it was a full suit, it was camera ready. But we were still trying to figure it out, and they built a set, scaled down so it looked, and I remember Tony sculpted a pig guard that was about and a Gamorrean guard. It was about maybe 24, 28 inches tall. And we cast it in gelatin so the monster could tear it apart. And we shot a couple days of high-speed tests. And it was originally built for a stuntman who was about 5'8", 5'10", to keep it low because it had a very low center of gravity. But the suit was so heavy and awkward, mainly because there was an 8 to 10 pound Sony video monitor strapped to your chest with about a 4-inch screen, and everything was in black and white and flipped. So you're in the suit looking down with your knees. It was killer on your quads because you had to have your knees bent so you looked like the monster, with these giant arms with about another 2 feet of hand and wrist in front of your actual hands and wrists. And you're in the squat position looking down at your chest to see the monitor, to see where you're going. Very, very awkward. So he tried it and he just kept falling over. He couldn't even stand. So, you know, because I was probably the youngest, dumbest guy, I'm like, I'll do it. So I got drafted, at least for the test things, and we shot tests for 2 days, and then I think they convinced George it wasn't really a good idea. But it was fun, and you know, I always thought if I wrote a autobiography, it'd be the boy in the Rancor suit, the boy in the Rancor monster suit, or something. So yeah, so there's pictures of me with big Rancor legs on. Talk about wearing pants.
Yeah.
Big number Rancor legs.
That was my segue, and you thought I was crazy. That's how you segue.
I don't think you're crazy. I know you're crazy.
Oh, that's true.
All right, hat switch.
Hat switch. Where are we going?
I'm going Pith helmet.
You want to go Pith helmet? All right.
Nice. Max
I
donated.
Yeah, you got nice feathers on that one. Mine's just.
I have more flair in my head. Wait, if I put these on, I look like I should be like, hey, yes, marvelous, marvelous. Anyway.
You look like Shrunken Ned before his head was cut off.
Right. Exactly. So I can't read the things going by so fast. Are you paying any attention to what these people are saying?
I am. Between that and now apparently just tapping my phone every 5 minutes because it wants to go to sleep for some reason. It hasn't done that in past shows, but it wants to do that now. But no,
that's bad news if I'm putting your phone to sleep.
Right. This is horrible. What's your? I just got random questions. I'm watching for people's questions. But what's your favorite movie?
Jeez, I probably have like 8, but I mean, I think top 3, I can do that. Star Wars is huge. Monty Python and the Holy Grail. There's sort of like 3 things that shaped what I think movies should be. So it's Star Wars, just because I was the right age, right time. I was 14, and I love sci-fi movies, and I wanted to be an effects guy. So it was like a bullet to the brain. It was so like perfect. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, it came out roughly the same time, a little earlier, I guess. But that sense of silliness and just complete lunacy, I loved. And then probably, God, I'm such a movie nut. Probably Citizen Kane, although I watched it again recently, and I thought, God, it's such an amazingly crafted film. I think that, and none of these are, you know, esoteric or off the beaten path. They're all pretty standard epic movies. But Citizen Kane showed me the art of filmmaking, like you could make, because Python was all kind of about the fun. I mean, the art direction was good. It was kind of Star Wars, the art direction was amazing, but it was an imagined world. Where Citizen Kane was like, you could make our world, the world that we live in, look amazing with camera angles and you know, all the tricks of the trade. So I think I've always said those 3 are probably the most influential. But again, I saw them all before I was 16 years old. So
one question just popped up and said, if not for movies, what would you be doing?
I've thought about that actually a lot. I wanted to be, if I didn't go into movies, I would have probably been a biologist, possibly a marine. But I love the ocean. I love marine mammals. I was fascinated with dolphins. I read John Lilly's books when I was in probably about 10th grade. And so probably one of the biological sciences, probably marine biology. And it's funny, I know a bunch of creature guys who've told me that, who said I was going to say,
I guess that would, for creature guys, I guess that makes sense.
Exactly. They're creatures that are intelligent and completely different from us. So it's fascinating. Octopi also, I think cetaceans, which are whales and dolphins, and octopi were both fascinated me and still do. I mean, but what's funny is it all kind of falls under the umbrella of Tiki, you know? I mean, oceanic creatures and all that.
Someone wants to know, have you ever almost given up on your career? The questions are getting very serious all of a sudden. Very heavy stuff.
Yeah, there was a time in my mid-40s, I directed, I think, 2 Muppet movies, and I could not get arrested. My agent couldn't get me. I was like, and the thing was, the movies, for what they were TV movies, were considered successful. The first one, they said, the Muppets are back after 20 years. This is, you know, or whatever it was. I mean, we got rave reviews, and I couldn't get arrested. I couldn't get a meeting, and the response was always, well, you're a puppet director, which is kind of like saying, oh, you're a Star Wars director. You can't do a movie about, you know. I mean, every shot's a special effect, and it's comedy, which is hard
Right.
to do. But there's very little respect for it. I said it's it's somewhere around directing porn. It's like, oh yeah, well, it's porn. I mean, that's easy. Which I'm told it's not. Probably more for the actors than the director. but I digress. Yeah, so there was a time in my mid 40s that I just was like, I just wanted to give it all up. I mean, look, as an artist, there's ups and downs all the time. There's periods where I would say 3 times in my life, I thought I grabbed the brass ring, where I sold an idea. I sold a pilot to Fox, my own idea, and I'd written the script, and they loved it, and Fox Animation was going to do it. And then a regime change came in, and they said, no, my show is all about talking animals. And they said, no shows with talking animals. And I was like, okay. I mean, literally like 2 months after I'd sold it, and we were going to do the final rewrite. And so there's definitely times where I just, feel about almost like, what would I do? I can't go into marine biology now. The question I always get is, well, what would I do if, I said I wouldn't leave the business, but if the business left me, I'd probably write and illustrate children's books or something at this point, because I'm a writer. I have enough cred that I've talked to publishers and said, hey, with my background, would you? And they said, yeah, it's not like we'd buy your books, but we'd read them. And, if you're an illustrator, we'd definitely look at them. It's not like a completely blind submission. Yeah, there's definitely about a 6-month period in my mid 40s. I also had a bad breakup where everything was crappy. I wasn't working. I couldn't get gigs. I didn't have an overall deal with anybody anymore, so I was just kind of out on my own, and I had a breakup, and it was for the right reasons, and we're still friends, but it was just hard. So yeah, there's definitely probably about 12, about 15 years ago, I almost put through it all. I mean, not suicide. I mean, just went, all right, I'm going to go write children's books in a hut somewhere.
Nothing wrong with that.
It's tough being an artist these days. You're in this gig economy, and the industry, the film industry and television, everyone's a freelancer. There's no used to be writing staffs, and studios had prop departments, art departments. It was all in-house. Now it's all farmed out. So, it's not just me, it's everybody. It's Crips. It's there's no standing kind of job. You're always gunning for the next one. And the industry is going through a lot of changes right now. Streaming is becoming, particularly now with the isolation, social distancing, streaming is becoming incredibly important. So, and movies are kind of shutting down. What I think this might do is make everything streaming, essentially, or at least day and date with theatrical releases. Like most movies, except for maybe a Star Wars or a Harry Potter or an Avatar, I don't really even go to the movies anymore. It's $20 to buy the Blu-ray, and it's $20 to see the movie with one person. 2 people want to go to the movie, it's $45, at least in Los Angeles and New York, big city.
At least a good theater, a nice theater. Yeah.
And you can buy the 4K, in your home theater and watch it with nobody talking over you and anything for $28. So I think that might be the wave of the future. I'm old enough to still want to own a thing as opposed to like have it on Amazon Prime, which has been great.
That's very true.
If we lose our power, then I can still watch movies, or lose my internet connection and still watch movies.
Right. You want to change hats?
Sure. All right, where do you want to go?
Where are we going? You want to go straw hats?
Oh, straw hat.
You want to do straw hats?
Yeah. I went for the classic.
Oh, yours is good. Yours is good.
I should be like, Pineapple Princess. I have my ukulele here, but I think in respect for your listeners, I won't play it.
Your video got a little choppy. At least it is on my end, but I don't know if
I have
it's
no
looking
idea.
choppy for the rest. But you're still there, and we can still see it's a very large hat.
Good.
Which is really all that's important.
Really? Yeah.
Let's bounce over to Henson. When did you start off with those guys?
I met Jim right after Star Trek 4. So I did Star Trek 4 after Gremlins and had a great time on that. And then the effects producer for a company called Omnibus Able, a gal named BJ Rack. Her husband, or I guess they were separated or divorced, but her husband, the father of her children, was James Frawley, who directed the original Muppet. And I was showing her creature designs and fun ideas. I never wanted to do like Aliens or, I mean, Gremlins, and was probably the closest to my sensibilities, the kind of things I liked with creature technology. You know, the stuff that Henson was doing. And she said, you should meet Jim Henson. And I said, I would love to meet Jim Henson. And so I met with him and pitched him a couple ideas of projects. I had maquettes, sculptures I'd done, and story ideas. And we hit it off. I mean, he was just, I don't know how you couldn't hit it off with Jim. But if you're a creative person, he was like Santa Claus. I mean, he just had this lovely, very mellow demeanor, you know, and he kind of talked like this. And it was funny because he was not an effusive person. He was supportive, but very, very even keeled. If he would love something, he'd go, that's lovely. And we used to joke about it, you know, like, and if he didn't like something, he wouldn't say, no, that's bullshit or that's crap. He'd be like, yeah, I think we'll go in another direction. So he was just this very gentle, incredibly supportive person who was obviously amazingly creative. So it was sort of, I mean, the Muppets were one of my loves, but I wasn't a rabid fan. I loved more what Jim Henson and his company represented as opposed to, like, I know people who, you know, live and die by the Muppets, and I thought they were fun. I loved them because of their craziness. The movies, after the first movie, I kind of got less interested because I really didn't care if Miss Piggy got married to Kermit or not. And that's, they keep rehashing that story. I'm like, oh my God, let's do something fun. But anyway, I met Jim, I showed him these things, and he said, I'd like to hire you as a freelancer. I said, great. So I started working at home in LA. And after about a year and a half, I met him around the summer, I think, of 86. So in late 87, he asked if I would be interested in moving to New York to work on this new series he'd sold called The Jim Henson Hour. And I was like, absolutely. So I moved to New York and got an apartment on the Upper East Side and started working with him initially as an idea guy, which was, Jim was one of the few people or companies that would have an idea guy. You know, I wasn't a writer. I was sort of a designer gag man, I guess you'd call it, back in the old like cartoon days. Right. So I'd come up with gags and visual ideas and characters, and he and I would spitball stuff. I helped design and create the, you know, brainstorm. We brainstorm a lot, which is like heaven. Sitting with Jim Henson going, you know, what about this? And he goes, that's interesting. Let's look at that. Or, you know, I'd go out and do a bunch of drawings. He goes, I like that. You know, he had this great little chuckle. So it was just like, I was too young to realize how rare it was. Because I went from George Lucas, who was not very avuncular. He was actually kind of shy. But, you know, if he liked something, it was sort of his way. There wasn't this studio system of development executives and eight people you had to please. So I went from Star Wars with George to Star Trek with Leonard, who was I worked with the 800-pound gorillas. So, and Leonard was like, you know, do what you think is right and just make sure I'm okay with it. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, Star Trek 4 was amazing. And then I went to Jim Henson and was like, oh, I like that. And then suddenly people are building it. So I was so spoiled by these amazing mentors. I know. And then, you know, afterwards, I mean, when I got to work after Jim passed away, sadly, the family was great, and Brian Henson took over, and you know, he was lovely. He feels like a brother to me, and Lisa feels like they're like family. But then sort of at the end of that, when Disney took over, you're suddenly like, oh, there's not just a creative person who goes, yeah, that's cool, let's do it. It's like there's a person who goes, well, let's take it to committee, and then you have 4 meetings about it. Yeah. The guy in marketing from Europe goes, you know, oh, sorry, that color is the color of infidelity in Greece. So we can't have a yellow canary monster or whatever. You know, you're like, what? It's so much the tail wagging the dog. And I'm not picking on Disney. It's really the industry at large. I mean, primarily from my friends who work in all these other franchises. But a big shout out to Kevin Feige, who knows how to run a studio. He's definitely a creative executive who hires creative people and listens to them and then guides them. And that's what Jim did. He would hire you and then guide you as opposed to tell you how to do your job or just give you no good advice. You know, right. The bad director is the one who gives you no direction. Because, I don't know, you're the creative guy, just thrill me. You're like, what do you
Yeah,
want?
I've been in those meetings where you go, what do you think of this? And they go, I don't know. What do you want? I don't know, but I know it's not that.
Yeah, give me 10 more options. I mean, I never complain about it because they pay you by the hour or the week. So if they want 10 more options, you just buy yourself another week of work. But it is frustrating only because, you know, we're all kind of geared to please them. I mean, you're not there just like, well, I'm just going to do what I want or, you know, write what I want. You want to, if you could give me a direction. It is shockingly, we were talking with some friends last night about how rare it is to have directors or even producers who have a vision and then they hire people because of their vision and then tell them what to do. It's frustrating.
Right.
Anyway, I met Jim. I don't give short answers, do I? I met Jim in 87, I guess, late summer of 86, and then started working with him and have been, I worked for the company steadily till about 2000, and then I've been a freelancer working with them on projects ever since then. That's 20 years now. Oh, wow.
So we can get to the 800-pound gorilla here, but when did Dinosaurs come into play, and how did that play out for you?
That was the last project. Jim and I were literally the Friday before he passed away. I think he passed away on a Monday night. We were having a lunch meeting, and I was showing him the second. I've done a set of drawings, which is how we'd work. We talk about ideas, and I go off and do some drawings and bring them back. And we were just going over the second set of character sketches, and it wasn't, you know, Jim didn't just go, here's the characters, like, what's the show? Like, why is this character like this, and why is this character like that? And so I'd done the second set, and we'd had lunch, and then we just chat because we were friends at this point. And I remember he had a little bit of a sniffle, and I stayed in New York that weekend, flew home Monday, and then I think Monday night or Tuesday morning, really early, I got a call saying he passed away, which was shocking for a million reasons. But at the same time, Henson had been making a deal with Disney Studios and ABC, which was owned by them, to an overall deal where they were going to buy the company, not just the Muppets. They were going to buy the whole Henson franchise. So after Jim's memorial and everything was kind of, everyone's figuring out what's the new next steps. They said, well, what's on the, what were you guys developing? And we showed them Dinosaurs and what it was at that point. And they liked it enough. And this was ABC Disney. They brought in Michael Jacobs and Bob Young, who had done Charles in Charge, I think, or My Two Dads. And so Michael was kind of a hit TV show producer, writer-producer. And they brought him in, and we had a meeting. It was Alex Rockwell, myself, Michael, and Bob. And we talked about the show, and I showed him some of the sketches. And we had fun with it, saying essentially, and Jim's initial concept, which played through all the way to the last episode, was I wanted to do a show about dinosaur thinking with actual dinosaurs playing, the family. And, people accused us of being a ripoff of The Simpsons because we came out, I think, in '91. But that idea was before The Simpsons had hit the air. It was just shorts on Tracy Ullman. But the idea was to show that dinosaur thinking parody it in a way with actual dinosaurs. And so I remember Bob and Michael and I, and to some degree Alex was there, kind of hashing out what the show would be. And then I went off and did finished color paintings of the characters, and Michael and Bob wrote the Bible, and we pitched the show to ABC that summer, sometime the summer of 1990, so 3 to 4 months after Jim had passed away. And I remember I told Martin Baker, who was our producer of all our projects at the time, when we're going into the meeting, I said, oh my God, I just realized, what if they buy it? Like, what if we have to make this? This was like 8 or 9 main characters, plus 3 or 4 swing characters in a whole world. It wasn't like Ninja Turtles was the technology for the characters, wasn't the world. And they bought it in the room. They said, we love this. Let's do it. And so we all went into high gear. I moved to London for about 3 or 4 months and was there to help guide the Creature Shop build the characters. And then we started filming. It was either late 1990 or early 90. I think it was late 90. I think it was fall of early winter of 1990. We started filming, and I think it aired in 91 as a mid-season replacement. And then I wrote.
How many seasons did it run?
4 seasons. It was 65 episodes. I wrote 4 or 5 episodes. I think I co-wrote 2 and wrote 3 on my own, or wrote 2 on my own and co-wrote 3. But I did get to write the final episode, and the joke was, well, I got to create him, so I got to kill him. Which originally wasn't the final episode. It was just an episode about extinction. So being kind of an amateur biologist and an environmentalist in that, I was concerned about animal extinctions and humans' involvement in that. I wrote this episode about these beetles that they paved over their breeding ground, and every year they would come back and breed like crazy. So it was like this big party, and the gag was these beetles were like drunken Shriners, like ready for the orgy, and there was nobody there. And then we got the word. Well, I think I just pitched I'd written in TV at that time. You would write like a 3 or 4 page breakdown, scene breakdown. Here's the idea, and here's the scenes, how it would play out. No dialogue.
Right.
No dialogue. And that's when we got the notice that the show had been canceled. They weren't going to pick up anymore. And so we were kind of, what do we do? We said, well, let's take this story and just extrapolate it all the way out to they start causing their own extinction. People have come up to me, people in their mid-30s have said, you wrote, I hated that. Oh, I just lost you.
Yeah, I see that. Hold on.
I don't know what
there we go.
No worries. People are like, I can't believe that. It was so devastating. I said, yeah, but look, you're talking about it 25 years later. That was the point. We were trying to make a point. The show did have, I remember like after 3 seasons, the John Birch Society, which is a very conservative think tank kind of group, said we were the most seditious show on television. Which at the time I wasn't very political. I did shows like where the food in the refrigerator is revolting, goes bad. Food goes bad. I just like the absurdity of the concept of you have your refrigerator is basically like a terrarium because they wanted to eat live food, little mammals and things. And I didn't have, I still don't when I write. I don't really have a political message, but a bunch of the writers did. So it was a nice balanced show. We had the silliness and the quirkiness for the kids, things like that. Potty training the baby was one of the episodes I co-wrote. And then we had, the political stuff like the war episodes, Nuts to War, which was a great, and it didn't really pick sides. It just said, war stands for we are right. And that's the thing with war is like both sides, like we are right, no, we're right. And then you start lobbing bombs at each other. So it was great. And Michael Jacobs, to his credit and to my great, advancement, he let me start writing. He said, you've got ideas. You're a writer. You just don't write. I said, well, I've written stuff. I just, I've always been pursuing the creative, not the creative, but the artistic side. He goes, well, you should start writing. You should be in the writer's room. And so I was in the writer's room 2/3 of the time. And then the other bit, someone would write a script about some creature and I'd go off and design it and then hand it to the shop. So it was a great gig for me because I got to do a lot of writing and designing on the show.
You want to change hats?
Sorry? Yes.
So do you want?
Yes.
You already did Fez, didn't you?
I started with Fez. I'm going to Pirate Hat.
Pirate Hat? What kind of show do you think this is?
It seemed appropriate.
I'll go with brown to match your brown hat. How about that? I don't have a pirate hat. Sorry.
I forgive you. The next time.
How about who's your favorite Muppet?
Oh God, I hate that question.
That's why.
But I do have one. I actually have 2 kind of over time. Gonzo was my favorite up until I helped create the character called Pepe, which Bill Beretta. I just had this slim gag of an idea along with a couple of the writers. I think Jim Lewis, with this comedy team of Jumbo. It was originally it was basically a big and little gag. It was an elephant and a mouse, and then one of the puppet builders said, "What about Jumbo and Shrimp?" And so he started noodling around this shrimp puppet, which doesn't look anything like a shrimp, but it was hilarious. And so Seymour and Pepe were born, and then Brian just didn't get Seymour because Seymour was kind of the straight man. He was kind of the big dope. But Bill Beretta, he's just amazing performer, and he thinks on his feet better than anyone. I mean, I would say not better than anyone, as well as the original Muppet crew. Like he creates these characters that you just want to watch. And so as a writer, and even as a director to some degree, Pepe's my favorite because the Muppets became so precious, which isn't necessarily bad, but I never thought of them as a kid show. When I liked the Muppets, it was Monty Python with puppets, the Muppet Show.
Right.
So when I started writing like Muppet Treasure Island, they had made Muppet Christmas Carol, which was very sweet and charming and funny, but it was so sweet. I was like, oh my God, I'm getting diabetes watching Muppet stuff. Let's do something crazy, zany. Like, and I was pitching. I remember we talked about a King Arthur thing, and I said, let's do a pirate movie. Let's do Treasure Island, and we'll blow it out the top. We'll have crazy pirates and you know, they'll sail the seven seas and just use it as a thin excuse to tell a story, but not be so beholden to the actual tale. And so Jerry, everyone said, okay, that sounds good. And I think at that point, Disney had the distribution deal, and they said, yeah, fine, go write that. So we went off and wrote this. I said the first probably third of it, maybe 40%, is exactly what the movie is that you saw. Then it became a road picture where, like, and that was always inherent anyway. We loved what the Gonzo and Rizzo interplay on Christmas Carol. So we wanted to continue that and just have these two guys kind of going through the story, you know, where they're originally, the original thing was there wasn't a little boy, Jim Hawkins. They were Jim and Hawkins. And then the studio was concerned that kids wouldn't, like, I don't know. I guess their thing was it was too silly and kids wouldn't like that. They want a kid to be part of the adventure, which is, you know, the original story. But anyway, we wrote this crazy script that started out pretty much what you see. And then they reined us in a little bit, and we made a little kid. It was we were very lucky to get Kevin, who played Jim. And then, see, this is why it's a perfect hat to wear right now.
I was going to say that. Look at that segue.
And we loved it. I loved writing with Jerry. I went up to Jerry Jewell's house. He lived in Northern California in a town called Mendocino. So I rented a little bungalow about a 5-minute drive from his place. And every morning I'd drive over, we'd sit in his office and we'd write. And it was his computer, so he got to sit there and do the typing. And I would either pace the room or Max is trying to fly away up there. Pace the room or just lay on the couch and just spout dialogue. I would jump into characters. I'd taken classes at the Groundling, so it'd been really useful for me as a writer to, instead of think about, like, watch the character, like become the characters. And because I knew the Muppets well at that point, I would jump into their heads. And so we got to, and it was great for me because I got to create all these weird, you know, all these silly characters like Polly Lobster and Clueless Morgan and Mad Monty. And then, so we wrote the script and it got greenlit and went to London. And the story I've told a number of times, but it makes me laugh every time, is I wrote Billy Bones, which is the name of the character in the original book, for Billy Connolly. I was a huge Billy Connolly fan since the 70s. And I said, we have to get Billy Connolly. And a lot of the people, most of the Muppet guys didn't know who he was. But so we'd written it with the kind of Scottish accent and brogue in mind. And when we would do read-throughs, before the movie's cast, you just do a read-through with the puppeteers, and I would read. I would read, you know, other characters that weren't Muppets. And so I'd do Billy Connolly. I'm like, oh, Jim, I love it. And do a mediocre Billy Connolly impression. But what's funny is when we finally cast him, which put me over the moon. I mean, our casting was great. I couldn't have cast that movie better.
Oh, yeah.
Because, again, I was a huge Rocky Horror fan, and Tim Curry was just like, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please. And because the Muppets are actually more popular in Britain, I think, overall, than they are in the United States, you get really A-plus actors. You know, they love the Muppets. So it was fantastic. It was in England doing rewrites and polishes, and Billy was there, and I got to hang out with him. Tim Curry was a dream. We're still friends. I don't see him as much since his stroke, but he would often hang out at Henson parties, and it was fantastic. I mean, for your first co-written movie credit, it was great. And I loved, you know, why people ask me why do I love Tiki and why did I pick that movie? It's because of Disney, actually. Tiki Room and Pirates of the Caribbean. The reason I have a Tiki Room is because the Tiki Room at Disneyland and Pirates of the Caribbean made me go, I want to do a pirate movie with the Muppets. And this was, again, before. No. I'm just saying I'm obviously a genius.
Well, of course. It just went by, but somebody said that they wanted those Tiki puppets from Treasure Island. And I was going to say that a lot of the puppets from Treasure Island, including those Tikis, are at the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
And they're gorgeous in person. They're really great.
Well, that's amazing about the Muppets is you build your cast, your new characters. You know, these amazing artisans build them, and it's fantastic.
So on that note, what do you think it is about the Muppets? And this could be a completely loaded question. I'm looking at our hat stock here to see how many more we got to get through. But what do you think makes them last as long as they've lasted?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is the purity of the characters, in that here's what's different about the Muppets as a writer or a director or anyone else, especially in television. In television, the writer is sort of king. The writing producer is king. With Jim and the Muppets, the performers were equally as important, if not more so than the writers, especially as the movies took off. And so the performers are given this responsibility to the characters that isn't just, oh, you're going to do Kermit this week. It's not just, they always have one performer, one puppet. Right. So Jim always did Kermit until he passed away, and then Steve Whitmire did him for 26 years or something. You know, they don't, it's not like Mickey Mouse or Goofy or and again, not throwing shade at Disney, but you know, you could say Shrek, whatever. Other franchise characters, particularly if they're animated, they just get a guy does the voice, and they do the voice. They don't actually own the character. Where with the Muppets, I always said they're more like Monty Python. I remember when Disney first bought the Muppets, we gave a presentation, and my pitch was, you don't go, oh, we're going to do a Monty Python movie, but we're recasting. You know, John Cleese is not going to be, the John Cleese characters are not going to be John Cleese. It's going to be, Rowan Atkinson. He's going to do Eric Idle is now going to be, whatever. They are the characters that they make, and the same thing with the performers. Now, that being said, a number of the original performers have passed away or moved on, like Frank Oz, and so the new guys are given the same responsibilities, and they take it very seriously. So I think a big part of it is the purity of those characters. They're not a franchise that is bandied about by, different teams of writers. I mean, they are, but the only thing that's constant is the performers. Like the movies, the feature films that have come out, Jason Segel and the James Bowman things, I had nothing to do with it. But the performers were still the same. So I think that's a big part of it. There's a continuity of character where in a lot of other franchises, they, especially over this period of time, like the Marvel movies, Clark Gregg always plays his character, and until they kill them off. But if you're making a Marvel movie 20 years from now, I mean, you can't. I mean, it is also the advantage of puppets and animated characters is you can keep them alive, but
they never age.
Yes, but there's more of a again, purity of character, because the person who performs it, and they get, I mean, this is what's frustrating as a writer, because usually in television, the writers, you do it and the actors until season 5 and they're all millionaires and they go, okay, I know how to do it. But they still usually don't argue much with you, because, if you're the original writing team, you're the ones that made those characters. Obviously it's a combined effort. With the Muppets, they will fight you. They'll go, no, I don't think Kermit would say that, or I don't think he'd do that. And you're like, oh, but it's funny. And they go, yeah, but, and you just learn that to not fight them, because that's what makes them successful. And you work with them. You're going, all right, well, what do you think you do? And then you just try and find something better. But it's more like like a theater troupe, if you will. Like Orson. What's the name of his theater troupe? The somebody type it out.
I was going to say I know what you're thinking. Did you have any input on Muppet Vision 3D? Were you around during all that, or?
Yeah, I did some gags. I designed the character Waldo and did the gags for him for that, because he came out of the Jim Henson hour, and that was our Jim wanted to do. One of the big things I worked on when I first started working was a computer generated puppet, or a computer generated character that was operated by a puppeteer, and I'd worked at Imagineering actually the year before Jim hired me, and so I knew about their systems. I'd seen what they used, and Jim was very interested. He'd already had the stuff he'd been using for the Doozers and the Ninja Turtles. So we worked on that Waldo character together. So yeah, so I was involved in 3D in that way.
Mercury Theater.
It's funny. I just thought, oh, it's Mercury Theater. Yes, you're right. Mercury Theater. Thank you. Thank you, useful person online.
So with how much time we have here? We got 15 or so. So let's talk Tiki for a minute. How did you, obviously with Disneyland, Walt Disney Tiki and Pirates and all that. Are we doing hats?
Oh yeah, if we're talking Tiki, I've got to go to my classic Tiki hat.
Okay, well I'm going to do Fez since I didn't get to do Fez yet.
I'm ending on brand.
That's all right. So yeah, how did you get into Tiki? What made you get into Tiki, and how do you feel being into Tiki?
It was the Tiki Room at Disneyland, and I think two things about it. Not only exotic tropical islands, but having a room that takes you somewhere else, that is fun, and it's exotic, and you kind of campy, but it's not silly, you know? I was thinking about it because I knew we'd talk about Tiki. I said it'd be like having a room in your house that looks like it's always snowing outside or something. It's it's always tropical and sunny. And in LA, that's not too different. I know people have them, that live in Nebraska.
Right.
But it's the same reason. You just like going somewhere else and decorating a room with this faux exotica or real exotica. But it's a big room. It besides the Polynesian islands, there's also African influences. There's South American influences. It's a big tent.
Right.
And I love that too. I mean, I have alligator skulls and a lion's head and a puffer fish and octopi. I mean, I've got a little bit of everything. It's sort of this pop culture catch-all, and there's very little you couldn't put in a Tiki room if you dressed it right, to make it work. And so I think that's the fun of it. And there's a bit of, I think Americans love kitsch,
Sure.
We love comic books. And Tiki's sort of a hipster kitsch kind of thing. I mean, we're wearing fezzes and captain's hats.
Well, I mean, it's a Wednesday night. I don't know what else we're supposed to be wearing, but.
Well, that's true. And so Tiki Room really was huge. It's why I have a bird. I love exotic bird. I love exotic animals. I grew up with lizards and frogs. And again, it's that biology kind of attraction of animals. I've always loved animals. My mom is still a huge animal lover and rescuer. We always had cats and dogs and rabbits and chickens and lizards and frogs and snakes. I kind of grew up in a small zoo, if you will. I mean, it wasn't a zoo, but it could have been a menagerie. We had canaries. And so I think it ties all that in too. I could have a pet iguana in here and a boa constrictor and a tiger if I could afford one. And they'd all they all work. That's Tiki. You haven't left Tiki.
It's fair.
Yeah, exactly. So I like that it's a big tent. I like that it's fun. There's a sense of whimsy or kitsch, campiness about it. I don't know. And then it's funny, the drinking thing came much later. I didn't really, I'd go to a bar and have a drink, but I didn't really get into the Tiki drinks probably until the last 10 years in my late 40s, maybe really my early to mid 50s, where I started getting mugs and learning how to make various drinks. And that was sort of
down the slippery slope.
What's that?
I said when you fell down that very slippery slope. Yeah.
Well, it's like the cherry on top. It's like, oh, now I have an excuse for all the decor. Oh, it's because I'm an alcoholic. Okay, well that's fine.
I have an excuse to go drink. I need that mug.
Exactly. What's funny or probably good for me is I don't drink alone. Except, well, I'm not alone because we're talking. But I rarely, if ever.
Max is there too. So.
What's that?
I said Max is with you.
Exactly, and I'm on the phone with you.
Fine.
I made up a dark and stormy, but because I don't drink alone, I have an enormous library of Tiki drinks and Tiki mixers. But I need to start having parties or something, or else I'm going to drown in my own. I'll have an earthquake and I'll be washed out to sea on a river of pineapple juice.
You'll be the one guy that says that was the best earthquake ever.
No, I'd be the one guy going, was that an earthquake? Did we just have an aftershock, or is this just a really good Mai Tai?
So speaking of that, What is your favorite drink?
Oh, I was going to ask you. My favorite drink is a Honey Honey, which is basically a bourbon Mai Tai. It's a Mai Tai, more or less, but made with bourbon instead of rum. I love it. So if you're just going to have a cocktail, or I mean, not a cocktail, I'm just going to have a straight shot, I would go for bourbon first, then scotch. Those are my two that I enjoy drinking just straight up or with a splash of water and ice cube. So when I go to tiki drinks, I was like, God, everything's so rum heavy, and I like rum. But I found the Honey Honey, which is basically, again, a Mai Tai with bourbon, and that is my go-to.
There you go. Good choice. Good choice.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, buddy. Oh, another favorite movie made me think of it as Hudsucker Proxy. That's one of my favorite movies.
That's a good movie.
It made me think of it because it went, thanks, buddy. My name's Buzz, the guy with the buzz. I'm at the elevator, do what it does. Just the dialogue in that film. I could watch it over and over again. It's just, that's a film that's like Citizen Kane meets, I don't know, Neil Simon and Monty Python. It's so funny. Or
yeah, that's a good one.
The French director, is it Genet or Caro? The guys that did Delicatessen, City of Lost Children, Micmacs, that kind of stylized magical reality. I just love that. And I think the three movies I mentioned have that. Star Wars probably to a lesser extent. But to me, movies, that's why I like Tarantino films. They're not real. He's not going, this is reality. It's a stylized reality, and I love that, and that's why you make a movie. If you want reality, make a documentary, or you know,
right?
You know, and I'm not poo-pooing, found footage films. They work for exactly that reason. They seem like reality, but I love that designed. It goes back to like my love of comic books, where you're telling a story, but you can artistically design the frames and the way it's told, as opposed to just putting a camera up and have two people talking.
Right.
So there, serious note.
Yeah, very serious. Well, we got about 5 minutes and this thing will shut off. So I feel like the only thing we haven't really covered yet was your acting debut, which I would be very sad if we didn't discuss your probably most noticeable.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do people? How often do people come up on the street and ask you to flip them off?
Rarely. At conventions when they know who I am sometimes.
How often do you go up to people on the street and just flip them off?
Well, that's just my personality. Especially now that if they get within 6 feet of me and they get close, I'm like, hey! What's funny is that character's so obnoxious, and that's very not who I was, and still pretty much not who I am. I'm probably a little spikier than I was when I was 23, but that came about. I met Leonard Nimoy. I went back to UCLA after ILM and doing rock videos with Fincher for 2 quarters to study computer animation, because I realized after working at ILM that computer animation is going to take over the effects business and the movie business in general. So I went to UCLA, where I already was registered and enrolled, and started taking animation classes with a focus on computers. And after 2 semesters there, so I think I started like in the summer, end of summer, and went through fall, and maybe it was just 1. I never lasted in college very long. I kept getting jobs out of it. Somebody came around to the animation department and said, Leonard Nimoy is looking for an assistant on Star Trek 4 who knows the effects business and knows movie making. And I had literally left ILM like 9 months earlier. And so they came to me and said, this might be a job that you would be good for if you're interested. I'm like, hell yeah, I grew up loving Star Trek. So I met with Leonard, and I literally had the resume tailor-made for the job. On Star Trek 3, which I'd worked on, I'd been on set for 2-3 weeks. I puppeteered the Klingon dog, and I did the worms that wrap around Korg's arm when he's on the Genesis planet. But I never talked to Leonard, but I'd been there. And when it happened on 3, he felt like he never knew if he was being given the truth about the effects stuff, whether visual effects, practical effects. He was an actor, and he was frustrated with the technical aspects of the directing. Can you hear me?
I got you.
There you go. So anyway, we took the alligator with all the butter, where it had to be. We pulled up the tail. Wait, did you guys not hear that story?
Is that not that story? Yeah, Instagram, the first time when I did the first episode with Brian Kessinger, it popped up on the top and says, you have 2-3 minutes remaining. And in each episode since, it hasn't been telling me that. So I have my timer, but apparently it's just quicker.
Frickin' Instagram. Anyway, so I got the job because I was pretty much genetically engineered to do it. And we got along like a house on fire. He liked my sense of humor. I, obviously respected him. Love Star Trek. So the way I got the job was the script. When I started, they had a different script entirely. And so they started rewriting with Nick Myers. They brought in Nick Myers to write the script with Harv Bennett. And Nick wrote the stuff on Earth in the present day at that time, which was 1985, I guess. And then Harv Bennett wrote the beginning and the end, the Star Trek universe stuff. And in it, Nick had the scene with a punk on a bus. So after that came out and we were working on the script, and I went into Leonard's office and I said, hey, because I'd been in a band in high school. I'd had punk hairdos. I love punk music. The Ramones were a huge influence on me. I said, I'd love to play this character. And Leonard was very dry and like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'll do the hair. I've had a mohawk before. My hair's longer now, so I can it'd be a great mohawk, and I would like to do it. And he said, all right, well, I'll think about it. And so he did, and I didn't bother him. It was about a week later, because we meet every day when it was his assistant and then associate producer. But at the end of it, I think it was like a Tuesday, and we'd wrapped up, and he would have a big gin and tonic and just sit there and we'd talk about the world and the project and whatever. And so I'm leaving, saying goodnight, and he goes, I thought about it, and you can do it. And I was like, wait, what, seriously? And he's like, yeah, just show me what you're going to do. And so I went home. I still have the sketch, actually. I found it. I drew what I would look like with the jacket and the mohawk and put together. I had most of the gear. The funny thing was the only thing the studio provided was the shoes, which you never see. And we shot the scene where I'm there. And I'm listening to this boombox that I decorated with all these bumper stickers saying, I hate you and I hate. And I'm just bopping along to nothing. There was no music playing because of audio. And so afterwards, they loved the scene. And he said it was great. And it was funny. And my other addition to it was when he gave me the neck pinch, I passed out and turned the radio off in my face. Because it was scripted that I flip him off, and then he gives me the neck pinch. I pass out. He turns off the radio and then gives me the Vulcan, hand sign. And Leonard said, and I agree, that was just too much business. It got hokey. So I just passed out and my face turned the button off. But then afterwards, we're doing post-production, and the studio didn't have a deal with a punk band. I mean, they were all kind of independent. So they said, well, we can use Duran Duran or, Pet Shop Boys. And I'm like, that's not punk rock music. We got the Dead Kennedys, True Sons of Liberty, Fear, like hardcore punk. And they're like, no, we're not gonna make a deal with those guys. So I told Leonard, I said, look, I'll write you a punk song and sing it. And if you don't like it, don't use it. But I'll we can tailor it to the scene. So that's how I Hate You was born. And Mark Mangini, who was the sound editor of the movie, who was helping to develop all the sound effects. And he and I met on Gremlins. In fact, he's the one who got me voice work on Gremlins too. He played guitar, and one of the sound editors was a drummer. So we put together a crappy punk band and recorded it in the hallway. And I just wrote what I thought was the most basic punk rock lyrics. It was I Hate You. It was about, and again, this was the the middle of the Reagan era, where we're all going to get blown up by nuclear war with the Russians. So it was all about that existential threat of, I hate you, meaning basically, the sins of all the fathers being dumped on us, the sons. It was true enough, but with enough of an arch sensibility, which is why I like punk rock. I love the Toy Dolls and the Ramones, because there was a kind of tongue-in-cheek quality to it.
Right.
And so he loved it. I remember he came in on a Saturday, because we recorded it on a Friday night and mixed it as crappily as possible. And he came in to listen. He was listening to the whale sounds, or the alien whale noises that a guy named Alan Howarth was doing. And so he came in, and I said, hey, we wrote this song and recorded it if you want to hear it. And we synced it up with the scene. And he listened to it. I remember listening, and just, he's a very serious face. And the scene goes over, and he puts the headphones down. And he goes, it's terrible. And I was like, oh, shit. And he goes, it's perfect. It was supposed to be terrible and annoying. So that's how that happened. And then what's funny is actually my voice is, you hear it twice in the movie. I'm the voice of the computer at the beginning asking Spock all those questions. Who said logic is the cement of our civilization? Who's standing risk kind of using reason as a guide? Correct. So I had written, so part of the other job of this great job was writing, I wrote Vulcan dialogue in the background. I wrote tech gibberish for when the Earth in the future is getting inundated with water and what all the people are saying to each other in the background. So I just wrote a lot of, you know, not gibberish, but kind of boilerplate dialogue for background people to say.
Right.
And so I also wrote these questions for the computer. Because again, I was a science buff and kind of an armchair naturalist. So I tried to cover science, philosophy, biology, made up like 12, 15 questions. And because we had to shoot, Leonard had to react to something. And he didn't want to just have the script supervisor going, who said logic is the cement of our, you know what I mean? So they recorded me and just sped it up and put a little computer flanging on it, or audio flanging. And we used that on the day and the set with the idea that, oh, they'll just use something better when we finish the film. And Leonard ultimately was like, no, I like it. Just use that. You can just make it a little more computery. So I remember at the end when we're in wrapping up, the movie was done, and the producer, Ralph Winter, who became a very good friend, said, well, we can't give you credit for that because your name will be in the credits 4 times, more than anyone else's. So we're going to give you, you know, Edge of Etiquette, sung by Kirk Thatcher, performed by Edge of Etiquette. We're going to give you Punk on the Bus and associate producer. Of course, I was like, oh, no, not 3 credits. You know. Well, that's
so how did, speaking of the Punk, how did he?
How did what? You froze. After how did he?
Sorry, I said, how did the Punk show up in Spider-Man?
Remember I mentioned Kevin Feige earlier? So I was at Comic-Con like 4 years ago, and our mutual friend, Michael Giacchino, we're buddies, and we were hanging out. He said, hey, Marvel's having a party, like an after Comic-Con party. Do you want to go? I said, yeah, I love Marvel movies. And he said, you know, all the execs will be there, and Kevin Feige. I said, oh, cool, I'd love to meet them. So we go to this party, and it's at a fancy sushi restaurant in San Diego. And we walk in, there's like 15 or 20 people, you know, finishing up dinner, and they were having a meeting, and it turned into a party. And so we walk in, it was David Silverman, who's one of the main director on Simpsons, and right. Michael Giacchino, who's already at that point had written, I think, 2 Marvel scores, and me. So they knew Michael, and he introduced David, and he introduced me, and he was Kirk Thatcher. Kevin Feige came up and said, hi, David, hi, Michael. And he came to me and said, wait, are you the Kirk Thatcher? And I started laughing. I was like, yeah. And he goes, wait, the Punk on the Bus from Star Trek 4 is also the associate producer? I'm like, yeah. And I'm looking to Michael thinking he's punking me. And he's like, he shakes my hand. He goes, you're the reason I got into film business. I'm like, what? I'm literally doing what I'm doing now. I was like, what? He said, yeah, I saw the movie, and I was 15 years old, and I saw your name in the credits 3 times and went, I want to be a producer because that guy got to do everything. And he said, yeah, you're the reason I wanted to be a producer and why I wanted. And so I'm like, wow, cool. Thank you. I'm glad that worked out. So I'd had a couple drinks at that point, and I think they were doing another round. So I got up the courage to go, hey, why don't you let me direct one of your movies? I've done 3 franchise films for Disney. You know, I said, I do them for like less than $10 million. You give me the kind of budgets you have. I grew up doing special effects and creatures and characters. And he went, good point. He gave me his assistant's name, and we were talking for a couple of years about a couple projects, and then, you know, I mean, they've been so successful that nothing's come of it yet, but, you know, someday. Also, I think he said, you're a puppet director, you know.
Yeah. You only have 3 credits. If you had 4...
Yeah. Well, now I have like 5. Anyway, Kevin's great. He's one of the producers who really is a creative producer who gets it. He was a comic book fan, a movie fan. He wasn't like a Harvard, you know, English major who.
Right.
And I just am so happy for the Marvel franchise, but really blown away by how good he is at what he does. And there's a lot of other people who run various franchises who I'm not a big fan of, and I won't say anything bad about them because other people have done a better job. But I think Kevin's amazing. I hope at some point he ends up just running his own studio.
Yeah.
If they'll let him go, if they're smart, they'll basically go, here's the Hope Diamond, here's your own island, please stay. He's outdone Pixar at this point. I think every movie he's made or been produced under him has done over $1 billion, I think, close to. Anyway.
That's crazy. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here before the phone dies out. But thanks for coming on. Thanks for spending some time with us.
I'm nasty. I'm sorry. I'm nasty. I heard you tell Brian Kessinger you thought I was trouble, that I was wild.
No, Brian Kessinger agreed with me, too. I haven't taken an insurance policy out on this episode.
You've got half of my friends list on your show. It's great. I'm happy to be a part of it. You got Michael on, right? Like on Friday?
Michael's on Friday. Yeah, Michael's on Friday.
That's a good look at you, fancy pants, and your fez. And now is that a Fez-O-Rama fez?
It is.
Let's give a shout out to them. Hold on.
The Sons of the Desert.
Fez-O-Rama.
There you go.
Those guys are great. If you're in the market for Fez today, look up Fez-O-Rama, your number one supplier of custom, what would you call it? What's the term they use in England? Custom bespoke fezzes.
I feel like they're the only guys making fezzes, but they do.
They found the market and they cornered it.
Wasn't that hard, I don't think, but they do a hell of a job.
All right, man. Well, I'll let you go.
All right, be safe out there.
Thank you. Live long and perspire.
We'll talk to you later.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
See ya. All right, so there we go. Sorry about that little technical glitch, but Thursday we've got Dave Perillo. That's tomorrow. Dave Perillo's on the show, and then Friday is Michael Giacchino. So everybody tune back in. If you came in late, I will post these on the feed as soon as I hang up here, and you can watch and send to your friends and share. And hopefully everybody took a screen grab of us and tag us in it. And until tomorrow night, everybody stay smart, stay safe, and we'll see you then.